You know, this three-panel comic is actually pretty funny, right? It perfectly boils down the entire plot into three neat little boxes. The families hate each other, Romeo and Juliet fall in love, and then, well, they end it all. It's a hilarious summary for sure, but as you know, it barely scratches the surface of the incredibly complex web of themes, historical context, and rich vocabulary that we're actually going to unpack today.
So let's just dive right into this explainer and journey through Shakespeare's absolute most famous tragedy. Whether you're studying this for the very first time, or maybe you're just looking for a deep dive refresher, this comprehensive study guide is going to give you a highly structured look at the play's narrative, its really profound themes, and of course, those unforgettable characters.
Here's our agenda for today's run-through. 1. Welcome to Fair Verona. 2. Acts 1 and 2, Rising Passions. 3. Act 3, The Fatal Climax. 4. Acts 4 and 5, Tragic Resolutions. 5. Forces of Fate and Violence. And finally, 6. Players and their symbols.
Welcome to Fair Verona. Now, before we actually meet our star-crossed lovers, we absolutely have to establish the context of Elizabethan England and the world Shakespeare was building here. The play is set in Italy, which was a deeply Catholic society where religion was literally a cornerstone of daily life. It's also a fiercely patriarchal society. Family structures were incredibly rigid, fathers completely ruled the household, and wealthy marriages, well, they were arranged strictly for status and power, definitely not for love. Plus, masculine honor was just paramount. Backing down from a duel was considered deeply dishonorable.
And that brings us to a really crucial piece of Tier 2 vocabulary, animosity, meaning strong hostility or hatred. This word perfectly characterizes the ancient, inescapable grudge between the Capulet and Montague families. You see, this civic animosity literally stains the streets of Verona with blood, and it completely sets the stage for the whole shebang that follows.
Moving right along to Section 2, Acts 1 and 2, Rising Passions. Let's jump into the narrative and see how this tension builds through the first 2 acts of rising action, where things honestly escalate so fast.
Act 1 wastes no time at all. We open up with a violent street brawl between the warring families, which prompts the prince to threaten them with the death penalty. Meanwhile, we've got Romeo moping around. He's feeling amorous, but he's just been rejected by a woman named Rosalind. To cheer him up, his friends actually persuade him to crash the Capulet ball. And it's here, right in the middle of his family's sworn enemies, that he locks eyes with Juliet, and this completely overpowering, fated love takes hold.
But, before he even steps foot into that party, Romeo has this really dark premonition. He says, "I fear too early, for my mind misgives, some consequence yet hanging in the stars." This absolutely highlights how Romeo already feels predestined for doom. The tragic trajectory of the whole story is set before he even meets Juliet.
Then we hit Act 2, and this is where the passion truly accelerates. We get the famous balcony scene where Romeo and Juliet profess their love and make the incredibly impetuous decision to get married. Now think about how massive this is for a second. Juliet is completely subverting the strict patriarchal expectations of her society. With the help of Juliet's nurse and Friar Lawrence, they get married in secret with this desperate hope that it might somehow end their family's feud.
But even as he marries them, Friar Lawrence offers this super ominous warning. These violent delights have violent ends. This right here is an absolute masterclass in foreshadowing. He clearly recognizes that a love this sudden, this intense, and this secretive, especially within such a volatile environment, simply cannot end peacefully.
Section 3, Act 3, The Fatal Climax. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the climax forces this brutal collision between individual desires and completely unforgiving societal rules.
Act 3 is the explosive pivot of the entire play. The oppressive heat of the day is literally stirring up mad blood. Juliet's cousin, Tybalt, comes looking for Romeo. Romeo, obviously, refuses to fight his brand new secret kinsman, so his best friend Mercutio steps in instead and ends up being killed by Tybalt. Blinded by grief and the intense demands of masculine honor, Romeo murders Tybalt. As a result, the prince exiles Romeo from Verona. Meanwhile, Juliet's father is demanding she marry a nobleman named Paris, and when she refuses, choosing her exiled husband over her filial duty, her own father threatens to disown her. It is just total chaos.
And Mercutio's dying words are totally pivotal. A plague o' both your houses. This curse acts as a dark catalyst. It's the exact moment the tone of the play shifts, firmly and irrevocably from what feels like a romantic comedy into a devastating tragedy.
The animosity of the houses has officially claimed its first major victim.
Section 4. Acts 4 and 5. Tragic resolutions. We now enter the falling action. This is where desperate plans are hatched, all driven by this sense of impending doom and heartbreaking dramatic irony.
Juliet is beyond desperate at this point, so Friar Lawrence devises this highly quixotic, incredibly risky plan. Juliet is going to drink a potion to fake her own death so she can avoid marrying Paris. The friar sends a letter to Romeo explaining the whole ruse, but crucially, the letter never arrives. Romeo hears Juliet is truly dead, buys poison, and just races to her tomb. He kills Paris in a duel outside, enters the tomb, and genuinely thinking Juliet is dead, drinks the poison. Juliet wakes up, finds him dead, and takes her own life. It is dramatic irony at its absolute most painful. Literally just a simple lack of vital information completely seals their fate.
So the really crucial takeaway here is that it takes this horrific ultimate sacrifice, the loss of their only children, for the Capulets and Montagues to finally see the error of their ways. The prince tells them, "See, what a scourge is laid upon your hate." Through their devastating double suicide, a bitter, tragic reconciliation is finally achieved.
Section 5. Forces of Fate and Violence. Having traced this tragic descent, let's zoom out a bit and explore the really powerful thematic forces that continuously drive these characters toward their end.
This brilliantly illustrates a core tension in the play: fate versus fortune. Fate involves destiny and predetermination, the idea that right from the very prologue they are star-crossed lovers whose paths were destined by the heavens to cross and eventually end in tragedy. Fortune, on the other hand, represents chance and just really bad luck. The delayed letter, the exact timing of Juliet waking up just moments too late, these are cruel twists of fortune that ultimately execute the grand design of fate.
We also have to talk about the cycle of violence. Just like love, violence acts as an overpowering, inescapable force here. The play opens with a civil brawl and ends with violence in a cold tomb. The strict societal codes of masculine honor actually demand physical retaliation, which forces even a total romantic like Romeo into a deadly conflict. Ultimately, the external violence of the society turns inward, resulting in self-inflicted violence. It's a pretty chilling reminder of how unchecked societal grudges can destroy everything from the inside out, something that unfortunately still resonates a lot in human nature today.
Section 6. Players and their symbols. Finally, let's examine the key players. Shakespeare masterfully crafts his characters not just as people, but as walking, talking symbols of the society and themes we've just been discussing.
Shakespeare uses what we call foils, characters who contrast heavily with one another to really highlight specific traits. For example, look at Tybalt. He represents aggressive, volatile masculinity and blind family loyalty. He's an absolute powder keg. Benvolio, Romeo's cousin, is the exact opposite. He stands for rational, equitable peacemaking, and he's constantly the one trying to de-escalate all these brawls. And then, of course, we have our protagonists. Romeo begins as a very melancholy, traditional Petrarchan lover. He's honestly in love with the idea of being in love, but to his credit, he is ardent and chivalrous. Juliet, though, is incredibly fascinating. While she symbolizes the romantic ideal of love, she is surprisingly resolute. She completely defies the submissive expectations placed upon Elizabethan women, literally taking her fate into her own hands by defying her father and proposing marriage to an enemy. That is huge.
Which brings us to our final thought. As you reflect on this explainer, consider the ultimate question of the play. Were Romeo and Juliet truly predestined victims of an inescapable cosmic fate, or were they simply teenagers who became victims of their own hasty, impetuous choices in a desperately broken society? It's a debate that has raged for over 4 centuries, and now you have the tools to decide for yourself. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.